Well, hi, Dad. Welcome back to the podcast.
Wow, thanks for having me, baby girl. I'm very excited. I
So
understand we
am
have a
I.
I
What?
understand we have a special guest today.
We have a special guest. We'll introduce him in just a second, but this is a special Christmas episode. So we both wore our Christmas flannels. That's a tradition in our family. Flannels. We just took family pictures. Everyone had like flannels on, and so
Right.
we have our
Every year.
Christmas flannels on. Yes, we are going to be talking about Christmas traditions. And Dad was a pastor for many years, still preaches in churches that need someone to fill their pulpit. And one of the things that I loved that he did was a sermon series on the history behind Christmas traditions. Because sometimes we just have these traditions and we don't know why. We just know it's like what our family always did, and we don't know the history behind them or where they came from. And then sometimes the history of some of our traditions is highly disputed, and people don't like where it came from. And so they're like, oh, we don't do that because of, the history. And sometimes I'm surprised. I'm like, really? There's like some nefarious like history behind that. So Dad did a great sermon series on that. And so I asked him to come today. And we're going to talk about a couple of traditions. But before we do, we thought it would be great to start with the reading of Luke 2, or the Christmas story. And I thought no better way than to ask my son Jackson to come in and read it. So he's sitting down here. Come on, Jackson. He's going to sit in my lap. Can you say hi?
Hi.
Hi, Jackson. I'm excited.
I'm going to read Luke 2, 1 through 20. In those days, Caesar Augustus made a law. It required that a list be made of everyone in the whole Roman world. It was the first time a list was made of the people while Quirinius was governor of Syria. Everyone went to their own town to be listed. So Joseph went also. He went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judah. That is where Bethlehem, the town of David, was. Joseph went there because he belonged to the family line of David, where he went there with Mary to be listed. Mary was engaged to him. She was expecting a baby. While Joseph and Mary were there, the time came for the child to be born. She gave birth to her first baby. It was a boy. She wrapped him in large strips of cloth. That's because there was no guest room. Then she placed him in a manger. That's because there was no guest room where they could stay. There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby. It was night, and they were taking care of their sheep. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of God shone around them. They were terrified, but the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news, and it will bring you great joy for all people. Today in the town of David a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. Here is how you will find a baby wrapped in strips of cloth and lying in a manger." Suddenly a large group of angels from heaven also appeared. They were praising God. They said, "May glory be given to God in the highest heaven. May peace be given to those who he is pleased with on earth." The angels left and went into heaven. Then the shepherds said to one another, Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph with the baby. The baby was lying in the manger. After the shepherds had seen him, they told everyone. They reported what the angel had said about this child, and all who heard it were amazed by what the shepherds said to them. But Mary kept all these things like a secret treasure in her heart, though she thought about them over and over. The shepherds returned. They gave glory and praise to God. Everything they had seen and heard was just as they had been told.
Wow. Very good, Jackson.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for reading, boy.
You're
Love you.
welcome. Bye, everybody.
So what were you going to say?
So Luke 2 is the Christmas story. You've heard that your whole life.
Yeah.
And how many times I encourage families to go home and to read it together, and Jackson read Psalms 100 at Thanksgiving, and the whole time he's reading there, out of a little New Testament that I gave him,
Mm-hmm.
sounded just like Linus in the Charlie Brown. It just
Yes.
blew me away.
Yes.
And then, so to have him read, I thought, what better way? I hope that in this podcast tonight, people will realize they can hang on to their Christmas traditions as long as they remain biblical in the foundation. Of course, your daddy's a concrete guy, so everything starts with a good foundation.
Yeah.
And if you want to have a Christ Christmas, then it needs to start from a biblical foundation. And then you can pick and choose, I mean, everybody can have eggnog, but you can leave the rum and the whiskey out and still be good.
That's true. Well, and I think that if, we're talking about traditions today, but that might be a good tradition to have someone read the Luke 2 story, like at the present opening time. That was always one that you guys did. And I love that, Jackson is just now old enough that he could open it up and read it
That's
all.
right.
So
Yeah.
he will probably be reading at our house this Christmas,
Right.
and allowing them to participate in traditions like that.
Mm.
I brought this idea up to you, and you very quickly came up with three traditions that you wanted to talk about. And
Right.
I found three that I wanted to talk about. One of them is the Yule log. We're going to get to that. But I had
Sure.
no idea. Like, I didn't know where that came from. And part of the reason that I wanted to do it is because I wanted to figure out what it was about. But as I'm reading, I'm like, what? This is crazy. So I'm excited to get there. But before we do, the first tradition that I wanted to look at was the plants. Because we have so much foliage that specifically comes out at Christmas. And, of course, we live in Phoenix. So cacti are always a part of our Christmas tradition. People just wrap lights around it.
Weird.
But that's not the kind of plants I'm talking about. So, if I say Christmas plants, probably those that are listening are like, oh, it's this plant or this plant. So I chose three. I chose poinsettias, holly and ivy, and mistletoe. And I want to talk about the history behind it. So poinsettias, I did not realize, come from Mexico. Did you know that?
Yeah, correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they come from Mexico, and there they were used many years ago as for medicinal purposes and also to create dyes. But it was actually the U.S. ambassador to Mexico that brought the poinsettia plant to America. And that's
Where?
how, to what?
Where did he bring them?
I don't know. Do you know?
Charleston, South Carolina, 1824, don't you know?
I didn't know that. That didn't come up in any of my research. Look at you. See, he's preached on this before. So everything is going to be like, yep, I know that. It's all new information to me.
And he was named after him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was named after him. His name was Joel Roberts Poinsett. So they named because they had to come up with an English name for the poinsettia. And so they used his last name to create that. But that wasn't actually how it got assimilated into Christmas culture. That happened, let's see, what was his name? Paul Eck Jr. He is the one who's responsible for bringing the poinsettias into our holiday traditions. And it's because he sent free poinsettia plants. He wanted to promote the poinsettias. And he was an entrepreneur. And so he decided he was going to send free poinsettia plants to TV studios across the country. And they included The Tonight Show, the Bob Hope Show, which if you don't know what the Bob Hope Show is,
Oh
you should go
my.
check it out. And to their holiday specials, and like just sent them a whole bunch so that people saw it on TV, and then the trend caught on, and now you see poinsettias in every store in the
Mhm,
country during this time. I mean,
mhm.
I've been given poinsettias as a gift when I've spoken at places or helped with an event or whatever, and I just didn't realize. But once again, it was some kind of commercialization that brought it to our homes, right?
Mhm,
Do you know any other
mhm.
facts
Yes.
about the poinsettia that I don't know, Dad?
Well, you can say poinsettia or poinsettia, and
Hmm.
both of them are appropriate.
Yeah, right. And also, I've heard people like freak out about, I don't want any poinsettias in my house because they're poisonous. Have you heard that?
Hmm. Mm.
Yeah. So it did say that it's okay for kids to have them around kids because it would take eating 50 poinsettia leaves before there was some kind of bad effect on a child. And
Wow.
they can actually be added to a salad as long as you don't eat a lot
Really?
of them. Yeah.
You're kidding me.
But they're really bitter.
Oh, okay.
So why would a
Yeah.
child sit down and eat 50 poinsettia leaves if they're that bitter, first of all?
That sounds
Uh,
like a gruel or whatever that salad lettuce is.
a gruel? I think you mean
What's it called?
arugula. Arugula.
That's the one. It's I don't even
A
know why they put
gruel.
it in there.
That's what gruel is, that nasty like oatmeal mush stuff.
All right.
It-
And we were talking about
anyway, and it's also only poisonous to dogs in like a big amount.
oh,
So you don't have to worry about it's only mildly poisonous. That's what it said. If they eat it in large amounts. So
okay.
I guess we don't have to worry about poinsettias in our house quite as much as we thought.
Well, I won't be putting them on my sandwiches anymore. Thank you.
Oh, that's one I have the most on. The last ones I have a little less. Mistletoe.
Hmm.
Mistletoe, the Druids believed that it brought health and good luck. The Welsh farmers believed, we're Welsh. Wait, are you Welsh? Or was Mom Welsh?
No, your mom's family was Welsh.
So I'm Welsh. You're not Welsh.
Morgan.
Um,
Hmm.
so Welsh farmers equated mistletoe with virility. And it's because of that that they think that it eventually got like brought together with love and marriage and kissing under the mistletoe. It's because it
Oh.
all had to do with that, like marriage and
Mhm.
being fertile and having children. But there's mythology that goes along with mistletoe too, and this comes from Nordic mythology, and it was that Loki, who probably no one knew about until the Thor movies came out, and everyone's like, I know who Loki
Oh,
is, you know.
yeah.
But the mischievous Loki killed Balder, the god of peace, by a dart poisoned by mistletoe. Balder's mother, Frigga, it's a really unfortunate name. Frigga, who was the goddess of love, cried at the death of her son, and her tears were transformed into the clear berries now found on mistletoe. Balder's life was restored, and Frigga made it a symbol of love and peace, promising a kiss to anyone that passed under the mistletoe. So there's
You have it. The
also
truth is known.
there's also that history that comes from Nordic mythology. So that's one
Good.
thing that I found specifically with plants, not necessarily with everything else, but there was some kind of story that went along with it, and people really attached to that story and then kind of ran with it, and brought it into culture. So holly and ivy, that one is used to be used to create wreaths to honor Saturn during the winter solstice, which is, of course, same time as Christmas. And it was used by the Romans to honor Saturn. When Christianity began to spread in the Roman world, they took these wreaths and they kind of reassigned what the holly and the ivy meant. So the holly berries, which are red, became reminders of the blood of Christ. And then the ivy which is green and, of course, very pokey, became reminders of not only the symbol of eternal life or, being green, but it also became symbols of the crown of Christ. And so holly and ivy wreaths, that's actually how they became a part of the Christmas cultures, because they were already around in Roman culture during the winter solstice, and Christians kind of took that and adjusted it to have a Christian understanding behind it.
Right.
Yeah. So now,
Exactly.
funny enough, rosemary. Have you ever thought of rosemary?
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't know that, and apparently the Greeks used to throw it on the ground on Christmas Eve,
hmm
and everyone who walked on it, who smelled it. Which, if you've ever been around rosemary, like you get within 10 feet of it and you can smell it. So anyone who smelled it would have a new year of health and happiness.
Right.
We use rosemary for landscaping here in Phoenix.
Yeah.
So
You're right.
that's kind of
Right.
always around. But so those are the three plants that I thought was interesting, is that they all, what I noticed with the plants is they all started from somewhere celebrating some kind of mythology or some kind of story, and then they were brought into culture with kind of a deeper meaning.
Right.
So
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's kind of a segue into the colors. You're talking about the holly and the berries, and
Yep.
one thing about the rosemary is the fact that I read where they said that the reason rosemary smells the way it is because Jesus' swaddling clothes, uh, basically rubbed on it, and so
I hadn't heard
it
that.
got there. It's kind of it's a connection that I read. And
Okay.
again, you can believe everything on the internet, right? Even Abraham Lincoln said, you can believe everything on the internet.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
And so you read stuff and you go, I'm not so sure about that. But the colors, I mean, it reads right into the colors. But I was thinking about, you're bringing about how they take a pagan thing and the church takes it and kind of converts it, kind of rewrites it, reworks it a little bit. It's already in the culture. And I thought the same thing about music, where when I was a youth pastor, I should probably 38, 40 years ago,
Yeah.
we were going from rock and roll and then contemporary Christian. Russ
Mm-hmm.
Taff and Stryper and all these
Petra.
people came out. Yes. So um, anyway, it was taking
Gen
what
Z listeners,
was,
don't worry. You don't need to know who they
yeah,
are.
you don't need to, but I remember how much of a struggle it was in the church. I
Mm.
mean, I was even called on the carpet for that, and the fact that I was bringing this Christianized rock and roll into the youth ministry. And I said, well, when you go fishing for trout, you don't take bass lures because trout don't eat bass lures. And when you're
Mm.
working with teenagers, they don't understand hymns, but they can understand a little bit of rock and roll. Of
Mm.
course, that didn't come, that nobody said, well, that's a great answer. Continue. But it's interesting how things get converted when you're looking at history, even in modern history. But the colors are, a couple examples. Of course, red and green are the major traditional, and gold. We see a lot
Mm-hmm.
of those three. And of course, we know the red and the green, the holly, which resembles the crown. Here in the Carolinas, we have a lot of holly, and
Mm.
it's wild. I mean, it's bushes. It's quite, it's everywhere, and it's there when you run into it with your pant leg, and
Yeah.
because it will let you know. And then the red with the represents the blood droplets. But when you look at holly in Christmas, it's for inspiration, and so it's a cool thing. And then
Hmm.
there's secondary colors, and I don't really know all the backdrop on any of these, but dark blue, white, silver, and gold. They're secondary Christmas colors, but the gold and the silver, when we look at later about giving or gifts, gold and silver, which would have been a major coinage back then. They didn't have a, a Colorado mint and a Washington mint and a
And a
San
dollar
Francisco
bill
mint.
and a quarter, and yeah.
Exactly. They didn't have any of that. So a lot of that was done with precious metals.
Mm.
And so gift giving would have been a part of, by the way, Saturnalia, or the worship of the nature god who allowed all that to move forward. You
Mm-hmm.
would give gifts
Yeah.
to others because you were so blessed in the harvest. And one of the
Yes.
things you do, you would give alms to the poor. And
Mm.
so I could see where gold and silver would kind of fit within that. But those are the main colors. And but I mean, growing up, everything was green and yellow, gold,
Okay.
white is another color.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go as deep as you did, but
It's
it,
fine. You
it
don't have to. But
oh,
and
okay,
I think it's with the colors, especially green and red. Um I think it's important to know that the holly and the ivy, where we get the colors from. You talked about Saturn. What did you say the name of the religion was?
Saturnilla. I think
Sat-
that's how you say it. This, yeah,
cool. Cool.
the
So
worship
yeah,
of
the worship of
the
Saturn. And
the god of harvest, whatever that.
yes, the god of harvest. But he so they all of this um, kind of folklore and some of these symbols come from the winter solstice, and which
Mhm.
is of course the shortest day. And so they would offer gifts to Saturn, because the days were only going to get longer now. And so they hoped that Saturn would continue to send the sun back to them, that the days wouldn't get any shorter from the winter solstice. I think it lasted from December 25th to January 7th,
Mhm.
January, I saw that somewhere, 5th or 7th.
Mhm.
And so it was actually, it was 12 days.
12 days. Yeah.
That's where the 12 days of Christmas
Interesting.
comes from. So
Mhm.
it was the
We'll
12
talk
days.
about that.
Yeah.
Mhm. That comes
So
in later.
that comes in later. Oh, see, I didn't even
Yeah.
know. We did not
No.
tell each other what our, like, I only knew what his topics were.
No.
Like, so this is all new
Well,
information.
but you set us all up. You prepared us by sharing some of the things we celebrate come from more than Christianity. They come from elsewhere. That doesn't debunk the Christianity, but it is truly an example. As Christians, we're supposed to be uh, the church in the community. We're supposed to be Christ, salt and light in the community. So, whatever culture we're in, you still carry that culture into your faith, but your faith should make a difference in changing, adjusting, removing, adding to, however you were raised.
Yeah, your
So,
culture's gonna give you glasses in which you're gonna look through,
mhm,
different colored lenses. You're gonna look through different cultures and um, uh, different things that are going on in a celebration like Christmas. You're gonna see it differently depending on your culture. There,
yeah.
there's some.
Which, by the way, this illustrates the importance of a biblical foundation. Because if you're not careful, Christmas can really, that we can be so Christmas focused that there's no room for Christ. And I think that's been one of the things that we've been challenged with
Yeah.
in
Well,
my
and
lifetime.
that's what I was going to ask, is that there's a
Mm.
lot of heartburn around, already all we've talked about is plants and colors. And already we've seen that there is a lot of, it doesn't come from a Bible story. These colors and these, how do we know that we're drawing the right line? And I don't, maybe
Mm.
there isn't a right answer, but like, do you have a way that when you're looking at something, because culture is constantly introducing us new things,
Oh, yeah.
how do we know, okay, this one's okay, but that's too far?
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it goes back to what is your anchor?
Mm,
If our anchor is Christ, then it would be Christ's book. And of course, then you can be talking about as a Christian, saved through the name of Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. You also have the empowering of the Holy Spirit. And so for many of us, we have not only the anchor of the gospel through Jesus Christ, but we have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. So one way that you can check whether something is appropriate or not is, what is the Spirit saying to you?
mm,
What are you observing? I see it in children's cartoons. I see it in TV shows. I see it sometimes in literature. I read a lot, as you know, and I read this stuff and I go, oh my gosh, this is great information, but this book is being written without a backdrop of faith in
Mm.
Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It is so humanistic that they're only seeing, and that's one of the challenges we have in our world today. I was thinking about this. You may not remember this, but there was a time when they were taking Christ out of Christmas.
I remember
And
that.
so they were happy holidays, yada, 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 yada. And Christ was not even mentioned. And I remember the Christian community getting in an uproar about don't let Christ be taken out of Christmas.
Mm.
Well, what I began to see is they're coming together, which they should, but they were also, um, I believe when Christ is taken out of Christmas, it's our fault.
Mm.
It's because we've let Christmas become less about Christ and more about
The
the culture
traditions
of
and stuff,
Christmas.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's my sermon.
I was gonna say, and that's the deep part of today. Let's go
Yeah.
back and let's go on to the Yule log.
There you go.
Okay, the Yule log. I think, like me, most people are like, oh, that's the channel you turn on Christmas morning that has the fire and the music. You're looking at me
Oh,
like,
on I'm going, what?
TV. Yeah,
Oh, I do remember that.
right. In fact, Disney Channel has one that you can turn on at any point in time. I think usually there's like one news station in every city that has 2 hours in the morning where that's what's on TV. Disney also has an Arendelle Yule log. So it's from Frozen. So it's
Okay.
got a cartoon Yule log. Anyway,
Hmm.
that's what I had in my mind as a Yule log. Well, my friends, that is
Really?
not
Hmm.
as far as the Yule log story goes. So let me tell you, this comes from the Scandinavian culture, and it starts with Yule, which is the name of the festival commemorating the winter solstice. So we're just going to give you little pieces of this. So that's where the word Yule comes from. And then once again, as that winter solstice and Christmas started kind of coming together, people began to use Yule or Yuletide greetings, also meant like Christmas greetings, that type of stuff. So that's where the word Yule comes from. And then they would burn the Yule log to welcome back the sun, because they started burning it on the shortest day. Now here's the part. I'm like, I don't even know. I don't even know how this worked. Okay. The family would go out and chop down an entire tree. And then as the family, it was carefully chosen and it was brought into the house with great ceremony. So it wasn't like just carried in. There was a ceremony that went along with it. And the thickest part, so like the trunk of the tree, came first. And they would stick the trunk of the tree into the fire hearth and they would light it on fire. They didn't cut the tree up. You just started with the thickest end of the tree and you set that on fire. Now, the Yule log tradition in Scandinavia was that you would use small pieces left over from the Yule log the year before to now start the fire for this year's Yule log. But you'd light it on fire and then just leave the tree sticking out of the fireplace. I'm like, what do you do? Like, how do you live around that? Had you ever heard that?
No, that's not that's not a tradition I ever talked about in the sermon. So,
And in
yeah.
today's like minimalist society, like to have a tree
Yeah.
sticking out in your living room. So then they would like continue to burn this for the 12 days and they just keep shoving the tree in until you reach the top of the tree. And if there was any part of the tree that wasn't burned at the end of the 12 days, then you had to take it and you had to save it for the next day. Or I'm sorry, the next year. That was required. So you don't throw it away. That was like bad. You take that whatever was left and save it for the next year. And you take the ashes that the Yule log created and you put it on your plants that, because now we're headed into spring, you put it on your plants to give them nutrients. So every part of the Yule log was used, which makes sense when we think about cultures. None of it was thrown away. I think it was, in one culture, the Yule log whatever was left over had to be stored underneath a bed. That was the rule. Go stuff it underneath the bed.
Okay.
Hopefully not underneath the mattress, because that seems like a kind of lumpy mattress for a year. But eventually, it did start to kind of break apart from burning a full tree in your living room to the whole family helping take a full tree down to actual logs, and then the
Right.
logs would be put on the fire throughout the 12 days, and then it became a single log that was burned on the 12th day of the 12 days of Christmas. So it kind of like adjusted and became different as culture went on. But I was just like, oh, and now a Yule log. Some people might be picturing in their head a chocolate cake that's rolled up with cream in the middle. And that's French. They took the Yule log
I like
tradition.
that kind.
I know, right? And it's really good, and it's basically like a ho ho. Is that what the ones that are like, or the ho
Ho
hos?
ho. Yeah, that's St. Christmassy.
No, you know what I'm talking about? The hostess
Yeah.
treats that are rolled up. Yeah. So
We
anyway,
digress.
it's like a big version of that. Anyway, I just was like, who is putting a full tree and burning it a little bit at a time in their house?
Yeah, well, that's
Not me.
some traditions we carry on and some we don't. Yeah, it might be a problem with the manager of your apartment if you burned a whole tree
Right. They come in
in
for a
the
check
hearth.
and they're like, ma'am, why do you have a half burned tree? Well, we're on day
Yeah.
6, sir. We're only, I have to burn the rest over the next 6 days.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry.
right.
What? Okay, so speaking of bringing a full tree into your house, Christmas trees.
Christmas trees, buddy. I was raised in the era where they had block trees. I think you can get them now.
You know what? That's
But
coming back. It's a big thing
oh,
all over Instagram. Everybody wants the
it
flock trees.
was it was big when I was a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember we would have block trees, and sometimes they would be multicolor, sometimes all purple lights,
Oh,
and sometimes all green lights, or
okay.
there'd be sparkles, and then the really goofy ones. Of course, remember, this is Las Vegas. You couldn't just have flock. You got to have glitter.
You
So,
gotta have glitter. That's
so
right.
you got to have glitter.
Dad
And
grew up
so,
in
and then you
Vegas, by the
you
way,
had
if
to
you don't
have
know
those
that.
little lights that go back and forth, and they would anyway.
Yeah.
But and then we had in I think the 60s, early 70s, you had the aluminum trees that,
Oh.
oh yeah, and you can, in an antique store, they're worth a lot of money.
Hmm.
So, but anyway, going back to the Christmas tree, um, what I read was Saint Boniface was a German missionary in the 8th century,
Hmm.
and he was the one that encouraged Christians to go get fir trees and bring them into their house as a symbol of worship, because the pagans around them were taking and sacrificing people at the foot of an oak tree. Now, I didn't go any
Oh.
further in my research than that. So
Okay.
basically, something that was being done in a pagan society was converted to a Christian perspective, not death, but life.
But with a different kind of tree.
Yeah, and a
Yeah.
different kind of tree.
Okay.
Exactly. So, and you think about it, an oak tree uh, uh, goes dormant during the
Yeah.
winter.
Mm-hmm.
Fir
True.
tree, evergreen, they do
Mm-hmm.
not. Of course, we have Douglas firs, and we have all kinds of different trees these days. Um, but anyway, the evergreens symbolize eternal life, and that they also point to heaven. They point to eternity. So it's a symbolic of the importance of the relationship that we have
Yep.
with Christ, right?
Yeah.
And with each other, because during the time of Rome, Romans would exchange evergreens with each other for good luck. So they
Oh.
would give evergreen to somebody. So I'm thinking, like, you see sometimes homes that have evergreen branches or Christmas tree branches, and they'll have
Like a
ornaments like a
swag type of
wreath.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something. And so they were handed out as a good luck charm.
Hmm.
Martin Luther, by the way, in the 1500s, he put candles on his
Yeah.
Christmas trees. And
Which I still
so,
think like, what? I know that he put candles on there to symbolize the stars.
this, you mean the Star of Bethlehem?
Not really. What I read was that it was like he kind of was overwhelmed by God's creation when he was looking at the tree
Mm,
with the stars coming through. And so he
mm.
wanted to make the tree look like the stars were coming through. And so he put candles on there. So, which
You
I'm
know,
glad we don't do
it's
anymore.
interesting. Well, and I read it was because he wanted to illustrate that Christ was the light of the world.
Oh, well, there
But
you go.
but your side of the story, having read a book recently by Eric Metaxas about
Oh,
Martin
yeah.
Luther,
Mm-hmm.
that describes somewhat of the way that Martin Luther thought. He was a very sincere and deep thinker. So I
Mm-hmm.
could, having read that book, I could see him actually doing that, of saying, how do I do that inside the house? Because I can see that in the forest. I mean,
Yep.
that's just the
Yep.
way he was. He
Mm-hmm.
was peculiar. But us Protestants are sure glad he said, faith
We
by
need to think
grace,
differently.
not of
Yeah.
works. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well,
so
and I think that the tree, I also read that the way that it made it to London, to the United Kingdom, was that
hmm
in when Queen Victoria was reigning, her husband was German. And so
that's right.
he brought it
hmm
from Germany because it was a German
That's correct.
tradition. He decided,
hmm
I want a Christmas tree in the Windsor Castle. And
Mm.
so it started there for the United Kingdom as far as bringing in the trees, or maybe not started, but that's,
hmm
anything that the royalty did, people paid attention to.
hmm
And so that's when it
Well,
became a
it's
bigger deal.
intriguing to me how much of modern day Protestantism came out of Germany. It's interesting to me
Mm,
that our roots are from there. Of course, that's where the break was, where, with Martin Luther, the Reformation, this is not really a Christmas topic, but the reality is there was a lot of different belief about faith and Christianity
mm-hmm.
around the late 1400, 1500s. And so, yeah, that makes sense with Martin Luther. I can see him doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to go to the big hitters now.
The
I'm going to
big
talk
hitters.
the big hitters. I'm going to talk about Santa Claus. I'm going to talk about Santa Claus, and then you're going to talk about nativity scenes or Jesus.
Correct.
But we're not putting them against each other by any means. But I do want to just give a warning to any parents that are listening to this with little ears. Just be aware that we're going to talk about Santa Claus and the history of Santa Claus. And so there's your warning.
Yeah, so Carter out of the room.
No, he's the one standing on the other side of the door. You guys can probably hear him screaming at me because
Hmm.
apparently I got mail.
Oh, okay, good.
He was screaming, "Mom, you got mail." Okay, well, okay. So Santa Claus was a real person. He was Saint Nicholas, and he was a bishop, and he lived in the 4th century. He was later given sainthood by the Catholic Church, and all of that was because he was a very rich man because his parents died and left him a lot of money. But instead of just keeping that money, he gave that money to the poor.
hmm
And there's one of the stories that really really affects our customs is that there was a family that had 3 daughters and they couldn't pay. They were so poor they couldn't pay the dowry of the daughters, and so Saint Nicholas came and dropped a bag of money down the chimney. There's the chimney, guys, down the chimney, and it went into a sock that had been put there to dry. There's your stockings, and so when the oldest daughter came to the age of marriage, he did that. And then when the second daughter came to the age of marriage, he did that again. And then he did it for the third daughter, so that each of the daughters was able to marry because their dad didn't have a dowry for them. So that's where Santa coming down the chimney and the stockings kind of come from, was that. But what he was known for was his kindness to people. And so he became the patron saint of the poor and patron saint of sailors. Did you know that? There's like stories of folklore, really. There's so many stories around Saint Nick, like the real guy, that it's kind of hard to know which are true and which are folklore. What do they call that? A tall tale. A lot of them are tall tales, so we don't know which are real. Yeah, legend type of stuff. So, but he, as a person, he did end up getting exiled from Myra, where he lived, when they were persecuting Christians. And then he was brought back during the time of Emperor Constantine, and he actually was present for the Council of Nicaea, which I had not heard before. And of course, we know there's a lot of decisions made about the Bible and scripture and what's in the Bible at the Council of Nicaea. So I thought that was interesting that he was there. But the real person did eventually die. And in basically as kind of time went on, leading from the 4th century to the 1800s, Santa became the person that brought kids toys, whatever that looked like in culture. And people had different names for it. You had Saint Christmas, you had Father Christmas, you had Père Noël, you had Kris Kringle. That's actually what he was known as in America. First, he was known as Kris Kringle. And then Dutch settlers came over and they used the word Santa Claus. And then we developed that into Santa Claus. So I go back to that scene in the Santa Claus with Tim Allen. You remember that movie?
No.
Where Tim Allen becomes Santa Claus and someone asks, what's your name? And his name in the movie is Scott Calvin. And so they're wanting him to say Scott Calvin. And he's like, Santa Claus. What's your name? Père Noël. What's your name? Sinterklaas. And then all of a sudden he starts naming off all of the names of Santa Claus from all around the world. And all they want him to say is Scott Calvin. And he's basically like, no, guys, I am Santa Claus. Anyway, so Santa Claus has a lot of names. But really, who we know is Santa Claus. When you close your eyes, what do you picture? Right?
A man with a white beard.
There you go.
Red cheeks and pipe clenched between his teeth. That's the kind that I had. And roly-poly in a red and white suit.
Red and white suit. So some people will tell you there's some folklore that the red and white suit came from a Coca-Cola ad. And that is why we think of Santa Claus. But that's actually not true. If you look far before that Coca-Cola ad was created, Santa Claus, first of all, you had Old Santa Claus with Much Delight, which was published in New York. It was a poem, and that's where we first get the description of him pulling a sleigh with reindeers. So that's where that came from. Then, of course, we have 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and that was published in 1823. And that's where we learn the reindeer names.
Oh.
But which reindeer is not present in the 'Twas the Night Before Christmas?
Rudolph.
Yeah, Rudolph's not there because he hasn't been created yet, right? So 'Twas the Night Before Christmas is the first time that we find out that it's pulled by 8 reindeer, and we learn their names for the first time. Then in 1820, then in the poem it also describes Santa as chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and then talks about a miniature sleigh with 8 tiny reindeer. So the folklore of who Santa is, that picture that you just described, a lot of it comes from 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Believe it or not. And so then there was a man, he's an artist, and his name was Thomas Nast. And Thomas Nast lived in the 1860s, and he every year would, in the Harper's Weekly, he would put out a picture of Santa Claus. And that, Thomas Nast actually is the one that created the Santa Claus that we know. Because he paid attention to these poems and to these books that were being that were being written, and then allowed those to influence the pictures that he was drawing for Harper's Weekly. And so it wasn't Coca-Cola that came up with the red and white. It was actually Thomas Nast. And then Coca-Cola created their own version of it in 1939. No, I'm sorry. I didn't write down the year. Anyway, when they created it, it was inspired by Thomas Nast, by his picture of Santa Claus. And then in 1939, that's when we got introduced to Rudolph. So Rudolph did not exist until 1939. And he was a marketing tool for the store Montgomery Ward. They created the book,
Really?
the
Monkey
character,
Wards.
and the TV show as an ad for Montgomery Ward. Mm-hmm. So that's why we have
Okay.
Rudolph. And Santa Claus, that's why he has a bowl full, a belly as big as full as a bowl full of jelly and all these other things, is because just slowly people told the stories and drew the pictures of what they thought Santa would look like. And we kind of adopted those into the Santa that we know today that we see. When you were growing up, Santa Claus, did he look like he does now, or has he changed?
No, I am not that old, I'll have you know. He looked the same.
He looked the same.
Matter of fact, there was one year when your Gramps dressed up in a Santa suit, like your Uncle Vic did that one Christmas. And but I remember he had a mask on. And I remember looking through the eyes of the mask, and I saw his glasses. And I said, "That's you, Dad."
But see, that to me right there is one of the bigger things that's different now than then, is people wore masks to try to look like Santa Claus, which obviously didn't look real. And now people will just put on like a prosthetic beard and let their actual eyes show,
Right. Sure. Yeah. No, I just know that, he looked like us. I remember as a kid, like Jackson's age and Carter's age, we had in Las Vegas, there was a big retail shopping center, and they had this big flatbed truck that they put this Santa sleigh kind of exterior on it, and Santa sat up in a chair or a throne, if you will, whatever. We would climb up the back of this trailer, and um, they would drive us around, and there's songs, and everybody's singing Christmas carols, and then we would all each get to go and sit in his lap and tell him what we wanted for Christmas. And I was thinking about it. That would have nothing but a flatbed Ford or a Chevy or a GMC. But as kids, and Christmas lights hanging from it, and hot cocoa.
And nowadays you would pay $15 a kid to do that.
Probably, or 25.
I know.
Yeah.
It sounds awesome, but
that was a big deal.
Yeah.
I was Carter Jackson's age, and I remember it as if it happened yesterday.
Yeah.
So
now I feel like
what
Santa
happens.
Claus is truly just like the secular culture, though we see that comes from Saint Nicholas, who had a very different purpose behind gift giving. There is a tradition that we do in our family. In the toe of our stocking goes an orange.
Yep, that's correct.
And that actually came from golden fruits. So once again, the gold that he put within the socks, people would put a golden fruit or citrus into the foot of the stocking to remind themselves of where Santa Claus came from and giving to others, which I think like 2 Christmases ago, someone was like, why do we put oranges in the toe of the stocking? And none of us knew. So
Well,
now
and
we know.
it really did. But I didn't know until we had an orange tree at our house in Glendale, Arizona. And they were orange by Christmas, but they really didn't reach their sweetness till like January, February.
Yeah.
You always had to wait for the first frost, because when the first frost happened, all that sugar in the tree went in the fruit,
Yes.
and it made them sweet. But they were a winter fruit. That's why a lot of them were in tradition.
Yeah. And I actually grabbed them from the orange tree in our backyard, and those go into my son's stockings.
Yep, that's right.
So, so
Hmm.
that's more the secular side of things. Now let's talk about keeping Christ the center of, our decorations and of our Christmas. We of course have the nativity scene. So talk about how did those come to be?
You mean as far as the nativity and stuff, or
Yeah,
what?
tell me the reason, at some point in time someone had to think, "Hey, this is a good idea to create, a small Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and
Yeah.
we're going to put them together in homes and sell them and, or create them or
Well,
whatever."
and that's what I'm hoping from this podcast is moms and daddies will start realizing, as fun as Christmas is and Santa and giving gifts and all that kind of stuff. I don't know a kid anywhere that doesn't love Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Christmas show on TV, or Frosty the Snowman,
Yeah.
and what would Christmas be without the Grinch? I mean,
Yeah, it's
those
true.
are all things that are part of our culture and our
Yeah.
history. And the challenge with that is there's a lot of Christians who don't pass on their faith. They're
Mm.
Christians, they go to church, they do this, they do that, but they don't pass it along to their kids. And so their kids are another generation further away. So I may want to encourage everybody at your podcast this year, give the greatest gift to your family at Christmas and bring Christ back into your Christmas. You'll remember the little nativity set, Joseph and Mary and baby Jesus, that we hang in the middle of our Christmas tree.
Yeah.
We do that on purpose. And it's going to be hung on my Christmas tree, and Diane's Christmas tree
Mhm.
this week, because we want to make sure that everybody sees that front and center, that Christ is the center of our Christmas. And so the nativity that Joseph and that Mary and baby Jesus actually was started by Saint Francis of Assisi.
Mm.
He was the one who was given credit for this.
Okay.
He was an Italian friar. He lived in the early 1200s, and back then all of the Catholic services were done in Latin. Well, the challenge with that is the people he was working with can't read. Number
Mm.
two, they don't speak Latin. And so what he wanted to do was take the scriptures and, if I can use this word, humanize, or put them in a language that they would understand.
Mm.
And so he developed a nativity of actors. So you had Joseph, you had Mary, you had baby Jesus, you had the shepherds, you had the wise guys, Manny Moon Jack. You had all of these different figurines. That brings back a memory, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, but all of these things that were in the nativity. And so he was the first one to start that, and actually in Italy in 1224
Hmm.
was when it became a big deal. I remember growing up in Las Vegas, there was a Catholic church, Our Lady of Las Vegas, and not too far from the neighborhood where I grew up. And one of our traditions was to do Christmas lights on Christmas Eve,
Oh, okay.
and
Which you
we would drive
continued with
around.
us.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yep.
And we would go by this Catholic church because they had life size, people size figurines.
Oh,
So
okay.
Joseph was a man size, and Mary was a woman size, and the camel. All of those were actual built. They were probably, of course. Remember, this is Las Vegas, where they had every stage, drama stage
Yeah.
paraphernalia you could ever want,
Mhm.
and but it was a big deal,
Hmm.
and people would drive by, and there would be um, chimeneas and luminarios and all of that. And it was a big deal, but it's
Mm.
teaching the story um, about the truth of the nativity.
Hmm.
Um, I also remember University of Las Vegas, Nevada, before, I don't know if churches did it or not, but the university had a full life-size nativity, camels, elephants, um,
Interesting.
wise men, everybody. There was a big old play put on, and I just remember the animals. I
Uh,
was so young. I was intrigued by the animals.
we're taking
Yeah,
the
I'm
kids
sure.
to a show that has live animals this year.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
So,
It's a neat thing, I think. And again, that was the whole concept of starting the nativity, was to teach the gospel, teach about Jesus Christ in a way that people could understand. And remember, we have our senses for for a reason. Our sight, our
Hmm.
smell, our hearing, our touch, taste. When all of those things can be activated in a learning process, you learn more.
Yeah. Well,
The
and I
the
love that
but it,
even this nativity was created not just as something to have in your house and look pretty or created as something to help me remember, but it was created as a way to reach others and to tell others
yeah,
about the Jesus you believe in. So
mhm,
I that makes me think differently as I'm putting out my nativity, that it's not
right,
about looking pretty, but it's about sharing the gospel with others.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I like that a lot.
And it's interesting. You go into different places they have done. We have a nativity that's from Panama.
Yeah.
We have one that you gave us from France. We
Hmm.
have one from Israel. We have one from other places one from China. I
My
mean, it's
parents had
just
like 20, 25 nativities that
something
came out
like that.
every year. Yeah.
But and you remember, of course, now remember, I learned a lot about Christianity after I surrendered to the ministry and went to Bible school,
Hmm.
reading the Bible on a regular basis.
Yeah. Right.
I learned a lot of things about the gospel or the Luke 2, and I always wondered where the wise men came from. Well, understand Epiphany is the 12th day of Christmas.
Yes.
That goes into June 5th or 6th, which we know comes out of paganism, and yet,
January. January 5th or 6th.
what did I
Yeah.
say?
June.
I'm sorry, different year.
That'd be like the 12 months of Christmas
Sorry,
or
I'm
6
choking,
months.
so that's part of my problem. But anyway, the wise men don't come along till later.
Yeah.
They're not there at his birth.
Yeah.
If you remember correctly, whenever we set up the nativity at the WG,
At
I
our
always
church.
put the wise men over on the piano because
Yes.
they were still coming. They
Yeah.
were afar off.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so those were
Absolutely.
some of the reasons why I was concerned about what people knew. And this is why I preached on this.
Mm.
The other thing is a nativity is called a crèche,
Yes, it
which
is.
is French.
It's French.
Do you know
Yes.
how they say it in French?
La crèche. But now I can't
Okay.
remember if it's la or le. So whoever speaks French and is yelling at that at us right now,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
exactly.
If it's feminine or
Yeah,
masculine,
yeah.
I can't remember. I'm sorry.
That literally means manger. And
Mm.
so, but the creche has grown.
Yeah.
And so,
Do you know what I
all
loved
right.
about the French crèche is that there was this belief in the French culture that it wasn't just Mary and Joseph. So you would go and you would look at their nativity sets, and they had Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus and the shepherds and the wise men, people like what we expect, and the animals, right? But then they'd have the baker and the lavender collector, and they had a story about a blind man, and the child
Right.
that led him, and then Santa Claus, and they had the angels, and they had the farm. Like everybody, basically, think of a little village. That's what their creche looked like. And I was like, why so many people? And they're like, because wasn't everybody there? Like, didn't the shepherds go
Mm,
and tell the village? This is the village they went to go and tell. I don't know where Santa Claus came in, but I saw when I was like, there's Santa Claus in that manger scene, but okay. But the idea was that everyone heard about what was going on there. And so I was like, I never thought about it that way until I went to
right.
France and watched them put together their
Sure.
many, I mean, their crushes could have like 100 people in them. It was like it was a thing. And they actually don't do as much Christmas decorations as we maybe do in America. But one of the things they do is their crushes that they put out at Christmas time. So, well, I asked Dad, I said, okay, if you have anything else at the very end that you like, we're like, oh my gosh, this is interesting. I just want to throw this out there real quick. I do want to say that a really good resource that I found for people is whychristmas.com. Did you end up at that and during your research, whychristmas.com? No, you didn't end
Mm,
up. Okay. So it's a
no.
great website, and it gives the history behind a lot of things at Christmas time. So if there's something that
Hmm.
your family does, go and see if it's on there, and you can find out the historical reason why somebody created that tradition. So that's a good one. Dad, what were there any things that you thought, oh man, this is a good one, we got to make sure we talk about this?
Well, I think the gift giving of the Magi is a good thing.
Mm.
And I have to be brief. Just so everybody knows, we were all together at Thanksgiving and we all got sick.
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to
uh,
cut out all of the coughing, but you don't know
yeah,
how much, coughing I had to cut out. Yeah.
the wise men. And by
Mhm.
the way, the Bible makes it sound like there's only three because there was only three gifts. Really, we don't know how many wise men there were
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's in a plural.
Yeah.
So we can't think that it's Manny, Mo, and Jack or whatever their names
Which
were.
were never their names anyway, but
Yeah, so it's a group of them, but they brought three gifts. And
okay.
one gift that they brought was gold,
Mm-hmm.
which signifies the kingship of Jesus.
Mm.
It was a gold given to a king. And so that was the one gift that was given. The second gift, frankincense, which is it's an incense
Mm-hmm.
made out of a gum that was used in the offering of the incense in the temple.
Yeah.
So it was something that you used when you were worshiping God, and it was used specifically for that. And so when they gave frankincense, they were signifying the deity of Christ. And then the
Yes.
third gift was myrrh, which is part of the embalming. They would take frankincense and they would take myrrh and other alloys. Nicodemus did this, others did this, that we read about in scripture, and that's what they would embalm the body with. Well, they
Yeah.
gave Jesus this mass of or this myrrh, which signifies the death of Christ. So it was
Mm.
all three gifts were signifying who he was, and I
Mm.
think that in our world of giving gift cards and other things, it kind of takes away of the
Mm.
significance and the importance of gift giving.
Yeah. And I think that the beautiful way to kind of recognize that is
Mhm.
um, to think quality over quantity.
Yeah.
I've loved when our family has done like, okay, we're going to make gifts this year. Or instead of everyone getting everyone a gift, it's you've got one person and it's your job to really think about what that person, really would like or something like that.
Mhm.
And we have members of our family that are very thoughtful about the gifts that they give. In fact, they're making a list all year long, and I in fact have acquired some of those gifts. I'm sorry, I've acquired that ability and that skill. I do keep a
Uh-huh.
list as the year
Very
is going on.
natural.
Mhm.
In the
Uh,
genes.
but and that's because I think gift giving is not just about giving a gift because we have to, but about giving something that we have worked on, that we have done specifically for that person. And we're making a lot of our gifts this year. And not because first of all, I have made gifts in the past because I didn't have any money. So making gifts was the only option. This year,
There's one of your gifts right there behind me.
yeah,
That
that's
gift
true.
right there behind me on the
All those
wall.
states, I made them because we didn't have a lot of money that year, but I thought that was really cool, and so I made gifts for people that year. This year we're making gifts because God has given us he's actually given us an abundance of things in our life, and we want to share them. And so we get to make these gifts and share the abundance that God has given us this year with our family and friends. And so we're really excited about it. I think to me, there's so much of a deeper meaning than like a gift card, like you said. But, sometimes gift cards are good. I do like a good Target gift card, Uh, but okay, we have one more question, and then we're going to both go and cough in a corner.
Yes.
Because we're
Okay.
trying not
I
to do that.
apologize to our listeners.
It's fine. I don't know any listener that's probably not experienced sickness at this
Oh,
point. So, what is your favorite family tradition? Either when you were growing up or like as a dad or as a grandpa, what is your favorite tradition?
One of my favorites was we used to make Christmas cookies when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
frost them and decorate them. And then your mom and I did that with you guys many,
Yep.
many times over the years. And that, to me, there was just nothing better than going and getting a decorated sugar cookie
Mm-hmm.
that one of my kids made. And they said it was a Santa Claus, and it just looked like a glob of frosting.
Oh
But
gosh.
I I still love homemade sugar Christmas cookies. And so that's actually one of my favorite memories. How about
We'll
you?
we'll have some made when you come for Christmas, so
Oh, good.
maybe we'll save some to decorate while you're here. Or maybe you can just eat
Okay.
the pseudo Santa Claus, you know.
Transformer. And by the way, I
Well,
found a transformer tank in my bathtub the other day. I don't know if it was a Loman or a Hale bath toy. I'm not sure.
when your grandkids come into town, you never really know what's going to happen.
That's okay.
I think my favorite family tradition that I remember was Christmas Eve. You, of course, always had to do Christmas Eve service. And so sometimes we would have to get in the car and drive to family. And like, literally get in the car after Christmas Eve and drive like 5 hours to get to family. So we would be there Christmas Day. But it's that Christmas Eve, looking at Christmas lights. You guys would get us in the car and we'd be in our Christmas Eve outfits and we would go to Circle K and you would let us get any drink we wanted, which was like, what? This must be Christmas. So we get an icy and then usually a snack. And then we would drive and we would look at Christmas lights. And I remember that. I just thought it was a really fun time because I know that you probably had to be really focused up until that point on ministry stuff. And you still took the time to then give us that special moment. I bet you were exhausted after Christmas Eve service, and mom too, because mom did the music, dad did the preaching. You guys had to have been exhausted, and instead of just saying, "Okay, let's go home and go to bed," you guys created a special moment for us in that, and so that's one of my favorite memories. But so thanks for that.
I love it.
All right, well, thank you, Dad. Hey, listeners, I want to know from you, what is your favorite Christmas tradition that your family does? We answered that. I'll throw this up on social media the same week. But I want to know what your favorite family Christmas tradition is, and I'd like to share those when you post them with other listeners, because I don't know if you're looking to start a new tradition, like maybe Christmas lights after Christmas Eve service, maybe is a great one to start. I don't know. Maybe Christmas cookies or something like that. But I'd love to know what your favorite tradition is so we can share those and kind of celebrate with one another this Christmas. But Dad, thank you for joining us again.
You're welcome,
love you.
Baby girl. Love you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.